Hi everyone. So we are going to get started on our presentation today. Just as a reminder as well, if everyone could please mute their mics if they are not the presenters. This will stop a lot of background noise that we get during the presentation. It's a little bit distracting, so if everyone could do that, that would be great. All right, so to start things off, our two presenters today are Dr. Jacqueline King. She is the Director of Higher Education Collaboration at Smarter Balance Assessment Consortium, and Kimberly Green. She is the Executive Director of the National Association of State Directors of Career and Technical Education Consortium. Sorry about that, Kimberly. But we are very excited to have them here today, and this is going to be a great presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it over to Jacqueline, and she'll start the presentation. Thank you, everyone, again.
Thank you, Celia. Thank you for joining us. We are a nice, intimate little group this afternoon, so please just jump in and ask your questions. We'll try to make this as interactive as possible. I know that often in webinars we're sort of on mute, but please take advantage of the fact that we're a small group, and we'll make this as much of a conversation as possible. This just lets you know who you're talking to. You can put faces with names. There's Kim and myself. I was lucky enough to staff, and Kim was a member of our Career Readiness Task Force at Smarter Balanced. So we're going to spend the next hour with you talking about that group and the recommendations that it came up with regard to how to think about a Common Core assessment in English and math with regard to career readiness. Not the easiest assignment, to try to think about how to do that in a way that that makes sense. But this was a great group and that worked really hard, and I think came to some very helpful recommendations to states. So we'll walk you through these. So the first thing I want to acknowledge before we jump into this is that there really is a philosophical debate about how you discuss career readiness, especially when you leave the realm of standards, where you are talking about whether or not students should be taught certain information, whether or not the certain content and skills should be part of what they are exposed to. And when you enter the realm of assessment and you start talking instead about to what level of mastery should students meet, that brings the conversation to a whole different level, and it becomes trickier, I think it's fair to say. On the one hand, one might argue that all students, regardless of the careers they may choose to pursue, should have the same set of academic knowledge and skills at the same level of proficiency. And I emphasize that because I think that's where it gets a little bit tricky. The other side of that debate is, wow, there's so much variation across the array of careers that a single performance benchmark for career readiness is impractical. And that was really a discussion and debate that the task force had and that they wrestled with. As soon as, I think there was a lot of agreement around the notion of the standards being similar, but when we started to talk about proficiency level and is the proficiency level really equivalent in terms of the requirements across careers, that's where I think it got trickier for folks. So just want to acknowledge that up front. So we came at this with some background related to the work that we had done on the college readiness side. And I will say that there is some level of general agreement about math and English language arts knowledge and skills necessary for success in entry-level courses. While there is certainly a lot of diversity, in general, and broadly speaking, faculty in higher education do have some sense of the English language arts and math knowledge and skills that are necessary to succeed in the typical entry-level courses. But with regard to careers, because of the diversity of occupations, it's much more difficult to get a sense that there's any agreement there. We are asking higher education to work towards recognition of the assessments as evidence of readiness for credit-bearing courses, so that students who score at a particular level on the assessment and who meet the other requirements established in their state can be assured that they will matriculate directly into credit-bearing courses and that they will not be required to take remedial courses. We aren't making any such request of employers or career education and training providers. We're not saying, here's a score on the assessment, and if students meet this score, you should employ them, or you should consider them as meeting the requirements of your career education program or job training program. So as a result of that, our approach on career readiness is quite different. The focus has been really on score interpretation resources and guidance materials, rather than on the development of a policy agreement, which is really where we were with on the side of readiness for entry-level credit-bearing courses. So this was really, this task force was really charged with trying to help us think about how do we describe these scores and student performance with regard to career readiness. This is actually the exact language in the task force, in the charge that was made to the task force, to review the available models and develop recommendations for describing student performance on the Smarter Balanced assessments. I've already said a handful, so I think I'll pause for a second, ask Kim if there's anything that she'd like to jump in and add, and see if anyone has any questions or comments.
Thanks, Jackie. This is Kim. The only thing I guess I would add is that I just want to underscore how complicated this issue is, and you said it well, where there's so many different occupations, and even thinking about kind of that transition into an occupationally focused post-secondary degree makes kind of this such a difficult kind of conversation to have, because there's not just one single number that makes somebody career ready for a single occupation, let alone kind of an array of careers. And so, I think the career tech community was really appreciative of having a voice in this conversation, and the understanding that Smarter Balance brought to the complication of this issue. And I think that the outcome that you'll share is one that, with the right framing, can be really useful to state-level policy discussions as well as local practitioners. So,
thanks. The next couple slides. Any questions or comments from the other folks on the phone? I'll move on. Okay. Please feel free to just jump in when the spirit moves you. So the next couple slides, I'll just give you some background on the task force. It had 15 members that were drawn from K-12 and higher education. It says here on the business community, actually didn't end up with anyone nominated by states from the business community. So that slide I should revise that slide. It really was people from career technical education in K-12 and in higher education, primarily on the higher ed side from community colleges. So these were individuals with expertise in career and technical education. And we also brought in some additional experts, labor economists from the Georgetown Center for Education and the Workforce, to advise us during this process. This is the roster in case there's you want to see who was representing your state. You see Kim in red there, and the rest of the folks that participated from Smarter Balance member states. These were individuals that were nominated by our member states. This group worked. Really started their work almost exactly a year ago. I guess it was a year ago tomorrow. It was their first face-to-face meeting. And then they had one face-to-face meeting, which was extremely productive and really where the framework that I'm going to show you, we largely kind of left that meeting sort of knowing what we wanted to do as a task force, which was great. And then the subsequent meetings in September through November were really about building out that work and revising and refining it. Then the recommendations went through several rounds of review. There was a review by member states, and then there was a public comment and review period. And ultimately, the recommendations were endorsed by our member states in April of this year. So the group started by agreeing on some baseline assumptions. The first was, for the reasons that we've already described, that college ready and career ready were not entirely equivalent, especially when we talk not just about standards, but about mastery and performance, and that in some careers you need far stronger mastery of mathematics than in English language arts, and in other careers that could be inverted, and that it really just, given the diversity of careers, was really hard to say that you could set a single standard in English and math and say above that line you're career ready and below that line you're not. There also was they also pretty quickly came to the assumption that when we said career ready, we really meant ready for some further post-secondary education, career education or training. That there really aren't career occupations anymore out there that pay a family-sustaining wage and offer avenues for advancement that you can enter without some amount of post-secondary education or training. There was also a clear recognition that career readiness is a multifaceted construct, and Kim led a group called the Career Readiness Partner Council that came up with a much more comprehensive definition of career readiness that certainly extended far beyond the English and mathematics knowledge and skills that are defined in the Common Core and that we will assess on the Smarter Balanced assessments. Then, of course, there was an acknowledgement. The converse of that is that that we were only addressing this one important but discrete element of career readiness having to do with English and mathematics. So the group really came to a sense that they wanted to talk about career readiness or talk about careers along a continuum in terms of the level of further career education and training that are required and the level of English and math mastery necessary to enter those different kinds of career education and training programs. So the problem, as we've already kind of described it, was how do we describe a link between these Smarter Balanced assessments and career readiness? And the solution that the task force came up with was what we've referred to as the career readiness frameworks, and I'm going to show you what these look like in a moment. We use the 16 career clusters that many states also use and that are part of the taxonomy of careers used by the Department of Labor in their ONET database to organize these frameworks. So there are 16 frameworks, one for each career cluster, and they are then, the occupations within those career clusters are then organized by the types of further education and training that students at each Smarter Balanced achievement level, and we have 4 achievement levels, would be currently qualified to pursue. And that word currently is really important because we wanted this to be aspirational for students and not limiting for students. So by showing all the levels and the fact that as your academic preparation improves, the array of careers available to you within each cluster increases, we want to paint a picture for students of the link between their academic performance in high school and their the array of occupations that they then are available to them. So the point here was not to limit students' choices, but to actually help them understand the array of choices and the link between what they do in high school in terms of academic preparation and the choice set that's available to them. These are really designed to be materials to assist with score interpretation and guidance. And so the task force determined that these frameworks should be very flexible. States can use them as they are, or they can adjust them to focus on high demand fields in their economies. They can adjust them to reflect the way they've organized career fields within their own CTE curricula. For example, I believe in California they've organized occupations into 12 categories as opposed to 16. To look at local requirements for careers. So, for example, in some states there could be local licensing or apprenticeship requirements that aren't reflected in these national frameworks. Lots of different factors that states could take into account to customize these frameworks, and the task force recommended that states establish a group to do that composed of representatives from K-12, higher ed, business, industry, and labor. The other thing about these is we've presented them as sort of static documents, but they really would live very nicely online, where you could link them to lots of additional, you could link to them from student score reports, and you could link them to lots of other materials, career exploration and planning resources, the ONET career information, and even information on particular post-secondary programs. So lots of ways that these could be customized. The task force had a few additional recommendations that were important. They reemphasized, as I've said, that the primary purpose is to provide students and parents with information for score interpretation. There is language that the task force drafted to help users understand the utility and the limits of the information provided. So these statements address the limitations of the framework and the occupation exemplars. We were using the ONET data, which is the best data that we have on careers, but it has some important limitations, and those are described in this document. The importance of looking at multiple measures to truly understand the extent to which students are career ready, and the important limitation that we're only in Smarter Balance measuring English and math. And then very importantly, a reminder to students and parents that scores represent performance at a particular point in time, and that advancement is always possible. The task force also really concerned about this even the appearance of tracking. So the task force recommended that the information on career options should only be displayed at grade 8 and in high school, where it could help students making decisions about, for example, participation in CTE programs and planning of their high school course of study, but wanting to avoid use of it with younger kids where it might be misinterpreted. So with that, I'm going to switch over here and show you an outline of what this would look like. There we go. Okay. So this is the sample career academics readiness framework. There were 16 of these that are built out with live data on occupations. You can see the statement at the top that was very important to the task force. Again, wanting to make sure that it was clear that that students and parents understood that the smartest balance scores are not an indication of potential, and that they place no limits on the types of occupations that students may want to pursue. If I scroll down here a little bit so you can see a little bit more of this, you can see across the top that the framework describes the relationship between occupations, the post-high school education or training required for those occupations, student smarter balanced assessment results, and implications for grade 12 that are connected to those post-high school education and training opportunities. So in this first group, you see primarily occupations that require a post-secondary degree, whether that be an associate degree, a bachelor's degree, or a graduate degree. The students who would be currently prepared for those kinds of opportunities are students who would be scoring at level 4 and level 3 on the assessment. And within each state, there can be requirements in grade 12. So this is where a state could insert information on what students would need to do in grade 12 to be ready for to enter credit-bearing courses and to avoid having to take any remedial courses. The next group down, these are occupations, and this is where there's a lot of variation from state to state. So it would be really important for states to look at this closely and to make some decisions about how well this applies within their given context. But these are occupations that often require a certificate or an associate of applied science degree. They may require other kinds of advanced job training. They do not necessarily require that these students are prepared for credit-bearing transferable courses in English and math. And that transferable word is really important. So these could be courses at the community college, for example, that might be credit-bearing courses, but they're not part of a general education transfer curriculum that could be applied towards a bachelor's degree. So if that first level course for a transfer curriculum is, say, college algebra, then the course and that's the first credit-bearing course. For these programs, the first course might be intermediate algebra, for example, which is not a credit-bearing transferable course, but it is a course offered at the community college, which may or may not also carry credit. And then the last group would be positions that require on-the-job training only. These would be students scoring at the lower end of the spectrum, and students who would need substantial support to be ready for entry-level transferable college courses. So that gives you a sense. I think I've said a lot. I think I'm going to pause here for Kim to join in and or for questions from folks.
I don't really have anything to add at this time, Jackie. I think you laid out the task force's framing of the issue and the levels quite nicely.
Thank you, Kim.
Sorry, I just want to interrupt for a second. We also have our chat box available if someone would like to ask a question at any time, or if it's during the presentation and it's not a Q&A, feel free to use that chat box to ask any questions or the presenters privately or openly to the public. But just wanted to let you know that was available.
Absolutely. We'll keep an eye on the screen. Any questions from folks?
Still in here?
Okay. So I think I'll go ahead and leave this up on the screen so folks can kind of continue to absorb it. Kim, do you want to talk a little bit about how you envision that states might use a tool like this?
Sure. So I kind of looked at this, and I'm going to say I'm really kind of thinking of it from the perspective of states/locals, and really kind of see this as having kind of three areas where I think this could be really helpful. One is in the area of guidance and planning. The second is in the area of curriculum or programs of study, and the third is really in kind of communications, and I'll dig into each one of those. But before I do, I just want to kind of underscore, Jackie said it, I said it, I think it's so important that this work is framed properly and that we just underscore over and over again that this is not about tracking, but from my perspective, it's really about giving parents, students, counselors, teachers information with which to make well-informed decisions. And so really identifying, where a student would like to be at in terms of their career aspirations, and then looking at kind of where they're at in terms of their current performance, and that being a set of information with which they can kind of close their aspiration gap. So to me, this is, kind of the analogy I always think about is kind of when you're wanting to lose weight and kind of saying, here's where I'm at, here's where I'd like to be. It's as simple as that, having a set of information with which you can make choices about how hard you want to work, what courses you want to take, what kind of additional assistance you need to get to be able to make the types of career options that you would like to pursue available to you. So I think that first bucket of guidance and planning is where I see probably the greatest immediate use for these, and really being able to inform parents and students and counselors as they're developing their college and career plans. And I know the task force said not lower than 8th grade. I would say that I know some states have college and career planning that starts in the 7th grade. To me, beginning to introduce and talk about kind of, here are choices that you're making that may influence your future options. These conversations and this information should be put in front of students and parents as soon as those plans start being developed, and really being proactive about kind of closing gaps and expectations. I also think that this helps people to see then kind of how connected the academic content and the career tech content is, and that on the career tech side, we've been talking for a long time about how in order to be able to do a lot of the really technical occupations and moving into those career fields, that you need really rigorous academics. I think just kind of a quick glance at these underscores that, but at a deeper level, I think there are opportunities here to identify places where there might be some curriculum integration, some cross projects where the career tech programs kind of are leading to the occupations that are listed on here. If you're not already doing some cross-curricular work with the academics in English, language arts, mathematics, this might give you a place or a pointer where you can make some of those connections happen. I also think that kind of the structure of it allows us to be able to kind of see the importance or the opportunities that we hear everybody talking about stackable credentials, and thinking about the notion of a career path or a program of study, and seeing that, you're able to move from one level to another through a progression of both content and kind of degrees, certificates, or credentials. And so as states and local communities are developing programs of study, which, by the way, for those of you who pay attention to the Perkins legislation, we know programs of study are quite likely to be kind of the only thing that Perkins funds going forward. Well, as you're thinking about building your programs of study, I think this can be a very helpful set of tools, both from a guidance and planning perspective, curriculum integration perspective, but also thinking about how you might lay out visually your programs of study to share with parents and students. And the last area that I mentioned was kind of communications. For a long time, I think people kind of looked at CTE as saying this was a track, right, for kids who didn't want to achieve academically. And I think some of that has gone away. I do think these frameworks, used properly, can again underscore that high-achieving career tech students are doing rigorous academic work. So I think it can be helpful from changing perspectives. I think it can be helpful, especially if you were to look at this and start to add in your state's or your region's salary information related to some of the occupations and be able to show parents and students kind of here's the cost of education, here's the earning potential, again, from a guidance and advisement perspective, but also really starting to change kind of hearts and minds about what is available, what does a family-sustaining wage look like, how are the different ways that you can achieve that when you look across the different clusters and across the different frameworks. And I think that's the last thing that I would say is that, I think this creates options for students. That how many of us when we were in 8th grade, 9th grade knew what we wanted to do? If you know that you're at a certain place in terms of your academic accomplishments and you know you might be interested in a couple of different areas, this gives you better information with which to navigate. Or you might be at a certain level and say, hey, I don't really know what field I want to go into. What are my options? And so if I look at the different clusters and say, okay, there are 6 or 7 of them that at my current level, these are the different types of occupations that I might be initially prepared for. It gives students and parents, I think, really great information, starting to connect the academic and the technical together and realizing that you need both of them to be successful in the modern economy. And so I'm appreciative of the work that was done and the sensitivity that Smarter Balance brought to this work of really making sure that people understood this was really about presenting options, not tracking. And I think it's a tool that will be very helpful as states and local communities move forward, both with the implementation of the Common Core assessments and with programs of study as we move Perkins reauthorization forward. So that's that's my perspective. I don't know if anybody has any questions or concurs or wants to add their own ideas of how you might be able to use these resources.
Hi, Kim and Jackie. This is Celia. I think it's really fascinating looking at this because when a lot of people think of CTE, they think that it's strictly you being pushed into the workforce. And although it does promote career readiness, I think what's great about Smarter Balance, the assessment you have here, is that it can give you options for also furthering education. Just because you have these strengths or weaknesses, it really promotes, like you said, options. And I think it kind of takes down the idea that this is your job, this is your career, this is what you're good at, but it's more so these are the options you have even for higher education. If you don't go straight to a CTE program, or even if you do a CTE program that does offer that, you could do 2-year, 4-year college. So I like that idea a lot, that it's not just a career readiness, but it's also what more education can I do to even further prepare me for that career that I'm good at.
Well, and I think probably most people who work with young people or even adults who are returning to the workplace, frankly, there's a lot of misinformation out there or misperception. And I think in some cases, it may come as a surprise to some people how much education you actually need to be successful in certain career fields that historically you might have been able to get only on-the-job training and experience. And now that's no longer sufficient given the advancement of the technology and the ability to have to read complex texts because the manuals are so complicated, or the technology that you're using requires a much better grasp of advanced math. And so I think this will really kind of dispel some myths or burst some bubbles or change some perceptions that some people may have about certain occupational fields as well.
Most definitely. I definitely agree. Thank you so much, Kim.
So the last topic we wanted to share with you this afternoon is, I've mentioned to you that there are these 4 achievement levels planned for the Smarter Balanced Assessment. the level 4 student, and just to give you a little more detail on those 4 achievement levels. So a level 4 student is advanced. They could likely, at the end of 11th grade, move directly into college-level courses and be successful in them. And those students should be taking advantage of accelerated opportunities like AP or IB or dual enrollment, other kinds of accelerated opportunities. Level 3 students have met the grade level proficiency standards. When we're talking about 11th grade, that means that they still need to do 12th grade. They're on track. They're doing great. They've got another year of high school to complete. And as long as they apply themselves in 12th grade, there's every reason to believe that they will be ready for credit-bearing courses. And one of the pieces of work that Smarter Balanced states are doing is determining what requirements would they set for students in 12th grade in order for them to be able to know that they can move directly into credit-bearing courses at the institutions where their scores are accepted and where they've been admitted. Level 2 students are going to need support to become ready for entry-level transferable courses. They may be ready for a course that's one level below that, and they may be able to use the senior year to accelerate their progress so that they avoid developmental courses when they go on into college. If they go on to college, the level 1 student needs substantial support. That student is far enough away from the grade level standard that they're going to need sufficient additional support through things like tutoring programs, perhaps summer programs, to get themselves to that grade level proficiency standard. So I've described these in broad terms, but we're going to have to, and there's much more detailed information that's been developed that really specifies the academic knowledge and skills associated with these levels in English and math. But we still have the step in the process, the important step of identifying, well, what are the scores? What scores are going to define these achievement levels? And that is a process that we are going to be engaging in this fall that I wanted to give you, describe for you briefly, because there's an opportunity here for you to be directly involved in it. This is the process that we will be going through this fall. Traditionally, the way that these things are done in state assessment programs is that there's an in-person workshop that brings together educators to review the assessments and to develop recommendations for the demarcations between the achievement levels. And we will be doing that, and we'll have over 500 educators gathering this fall for that in-person panel from October 13th to the 19th. But we're a consortium of more than 20 states, and the notion that we could have 500 educators get together and that would be sufficient representation really didn't seem right, because when you take that 500 and you start breaking it down between English and math and between 7 grades, it could be very possible that a state might have only one math teacher on the panel for 7th grade math, for example. And we knew that really was insufficient state engagement in such an important process. So we've devised something that we're calling our online panel. And this is open to as many folks as who would like to do it. It is an opportunity from your home or office or the local coffee shop to go online and participate in making recommendations for the grade level achievement standard. So that would be level 3. It'll take about 3 hours to do. We're only asking folks to make a recommendation for level 3 and not for all 4 levels, because even doing one level takes 3 hours, and we felt like that was about as much time as we could ask of people for something like this. It'll occur during that 2-week window, October 6th to 17th, and you will be able to, if you're interested, and we hope you are, be able to sign up to participate in that, and I'll show you how to do that. the next step in the process after the in-person panel and the online panel. So the online panel information will feed into the in-person panel. So we'll be sharing that information. So for example, when the 11th grade math panel is convened, they will be, we will share with them the recommendations that have come in to date from the online panel. So they'll be able to know what their peers around the country think as they are producing recommendations in person at the in-person workshop. So we think that will be really, really helpful. October 20th is what's called the Vertical Articulation Committee. That's a subgroup of the in-person that really looks across the grades and addresses any discontinuities in the standards, going back and seeing, are they justified, does it make sense, or do we need to do some adjustments so that we don't see big changes, big gaps in terms of the rigor between the grades. And then states will vote on these recommendations on November 6th. In most states at that point, that'll be the chief state school officer who will be voting. In most states, then this will come back to a state board of ed, typically for ratification. So let me tell you a little bit more about the online panel. You've got the dates there. I've mentioned it's 3 hours. Of course, this is free. We will respect your privacy, and your no personally identifiable information will be released. You can use virtually any kind of computer other than a smartphone. You would go online and register, then we'll send you a reminder. You'll select a 2-day window in which you want to do this, and during that 2-day window, you can log in and out as often as you need to complete the process. Here's what you need to do to register. Go to smarterbalance.org/online panel. You'll select a content area and a grade level. You'll give us your email address and your contact information. We'll send you an email. You'll confirm, and then you'll select that 2-day window. And the deadline to register for that is the 19th of September. So really encourage you to do this. Everybody has opinions about, are the tests too hard, are the tests too easy, what kind of performance levels what should the performance levels be. This is a chance for educators across the consortium states to weigh in on that and to make their voices heard. So I hope you'll take advantage of it and participate. Any questions about that? Okay. And then any questions in general on anything that we've said, or any topics that folks want to bring up? Okay. All right. Well then, as we're wrapping up, just want to give you a couple of resources so that you can stay up to date on the work of the consortium. The first one is our website, of course. There's a lot of material there. The career readiness material is not there if you go looking for it, and that's really because it's been provided to states so that they can customize it. What you will find is information on who your K-12 or higher ed representative is to Smarter Balance. If you have questions about, well, gosh, how's our state planning to use this? I would encourage you to direct it to that individual, and they can get you routed to someone who is tasked with thinking about how they want to use the materials and recommendations from the Career Readiness Task Force. And then the last is that we have a monthly or bi-monthly newsletter. I'd encourage you to sign up for it. You can sign up for it right on our homepage at smarterbalance.org. And we, of course, are active on social media and send out information via that vehicle often. So please follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @smarterbalance. So a couple different ways to stay engaged with the consortium and know what we have going on as we move into this new school year, where students will be, for the first time, taking the operational assessments. The summative assessment this spring, which is the end of year assessment for accountability, replacing whichever tests your state previously administered, as well as access to our digital library on formative assessment, which is a resource for teachers to help them engage in the formative assessment process with students every day in the classroom, and our interim assessments, which are optional assessments that schools and districts can implement during the year to track student progress. All of that coming online in this new school year as we all get ready for back to school.
Hair's not up. Hair's not up.
So with that, may pause one last time for questions, for comments. I really want to thank Kim Green for joining me today. She's actually taken time away from her vacation, which is
Happy
very,
to help.
very kind, and so appreciative of her joining this afternoon. So any last going on for comments or questions from folks? I'll turn it back over to Celia to wrap us up.
No problem. So we do have a question actually for both you and Kim. Just looking at what is the makeup of the in-person panel for the achievement level setting?
Sure. So it's let's see if I can do it about off the top of my head. It's 500 folks. Of those 500, about 80% come from our K-12 educators, primarily classroom teachers with some non-teacher educators such as content specialists and the like. Another 10% or so higher education faculty. They are participating in the 11th grade panel because we want to make sure that that level of rigor for college readiness is appropriate. And then the remaining 10% are parents and other community members.
Perfect.
That's primarily classroom teachers, and they were nominated by the member states.
Very nice.
So the only other thing I can tell you about that, so of course there's for each grade and both content areas, we make sure that we have on each panel, of course, teachers who teach that grade, but also teachers from the grade up, the next grade. So on the 4th grade panel, you've got some 5th grade teachers, right? So that they can say, well, gosh, I'd really expect a student coming into 5th grade to know X. So that's a dialogue you want to have happen. Also make sure that at each grade level panel, there are teachers who work with students with disabilities and English language learners to make sure that the particular needs of and situation of those students are being taken into consideration. So those are important considerations and kind of requirements for each one of the panels.
Thank you so much for answering the question, Jackie. I really appreciate it. So again, if there are any questions, please use the chat box. If you'd like to speak up, you're more than welcome to. Our presenters are here and we're free to answer any questions that you guys have. But if there aren't any left, then I will say thank you for coming out today. I greatly appreciate it. Our next online seminar is actually going to be one of our Army seminars, and it's going to be August 26th. And that's going to be running from 12 to 1 p.m., and that's going to be regarding our leadership and the process of leadership development that we're discussing with our Army partners. So if you're interested in that, please feel free to register. It's ACT Live is where we have all of our registration, and that's on our ACT website. This presentation also will be recorded, and you'll be able to find it on our ACT Live website, and all of our online seminars are actually archived, so you'll be able to find them there as well. And if there are no other questions, then thank you again, Jackie and Kimberly, and especially to Kim for interrupting your vacation. But Thank you for joining us and for coming out with us today. And I hope everyone has a great day. And feel free to email me. My name is Celia Loomis. I'm the Digital Media Coordinator here. If you have any questions or concerns about this online seminar or future online seminars coming up. Thank you again, and have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.